Her daughter-in-law swapped her eye drops with vinegar, then said, "Oops," like it was a joke. Irene Aldridge, retired architect and widow, didn't scream. She rinsed the burn in silence, then opened the safe her husband left behind. By week's end, the bathroom was legally hers. The deed was split, and the hot water line had a new owner. She'd shared her home with kindness. Now she was reclaiming it with precision. And when they tried to enter again, the keypad blinked red. Access denied by title. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Irene Aldridge stood in the narrow bathroom light, holding the tiny bottle like it was made of bone china. Her hands, always steady even through grief and arthritis, trembled slightly as she tilted her head back. She'd used these eye drops 100 times before. After all, dry eyes came with age, like silver hair and silence. The sting was immediate. No, not a sting. Fire. Liquid flames scorched her cornea as she gasped and clawed at the sink edge, the bottle clattering to the porcelain. She couldn't see. Only pain. Searing, acid-bright pain. Her breath caught somewhere between a scream and a sob. And then came the voice. "Oh my God," Lana said behind her. Casual, barefoot. "I told Josh not to mix the bottles again. That one's probably from the pantry." Irene turned blindly, clutching her face. What was in it? Lana knelt down, not to help, but to pick up the tiny bottle like a lab tech in a crime scene. She squinted at the label. White vinegar. Weird. Must have gotten switched. Oops. She said it just like that. Oops. Josh drove her to urgent care in silence, his hands gripping the wheel too tightly. She could feel the guilt radiating off him, but he said nothing. Not until after the doctor flushed her eye and confirmed the damage would be minor, but that this was clearly not a mistake anyone should shrug off. Back in the car, Josh finally spoke. "Let's not overreact. It's just a mix-up." Irene didn't answer. Not on the drive home. Not when they passed the little hardware store where she'd picked out the light fixtures for the guest bath. Lana now called hers. At home, Lana met them in the kitchen. She was eating a peach, didn't even look up when she said, "Next time, label your stuff better. We all share that counter. Remember." That's when Irene knew. Not suspected. Knew. She excused herself quietly, her left eye red and stinging despite the saline rinse. The rest of the evening passed in soft footsteps, the rustling of receipts in the back of the kitchen drawer, the clicking of old cabinet doors she hadn't opened in months. At 11:13 p.m., while the house was dark, except for the soft blue glow of Lana's laptop down the hall, Irene sat at her desk, the one facing the garden. She opened the drawer where she kept the old address book, the one no one in the house knew she still used. She flipped past names she hadn't dialed since her husband passed. Her hand stopped on the tab marked K. She picked up the landline, not the cell phone Lana had programmed for her, with all its cheerful little apps she never used. The landline. The one only 2 people ever called anymore. She dialed slowly. 3 rings. Kelsey Brandt. The voice answered, even and clipped. Irene's voice was calm now, flat as polished glass. "I need to move a bathroom." And a title. There was a pause on the other end, then a simple, "I'm listening." Irene glanced down at the small notebook by her hand. On it, she had written today's date in neat cursive. April 3rd. Under it, one word, "Begin." Irene opened the closet in the hallway. The closet. The one with the folding door that always stuck halfway through its glide. The one Lana once called useless junk storage. Inside, behind 2 banker boxes labeled Christmas and old tax forms, was a flat fireproof safe no one but her late husband had ever known the code to. She tapped it awake. 7438. Their wedding date reversed. The keypad chirped, the metal groaned slightly as it opened. Inside were 2 thick manila folders. One was labeled Estate, the other Original Plans, Aldridge Property, Boulder. She carried both to the dining room table. The good one, the old walnut slab with the faint water ring from Josh's 8th birthday party. She laid out the blueprints like battlefield maps, smoothing the creases with the backs of her palms. Then she unrolled the second bright white printer paper, laser measurements, color-coded areas. Lana's remodel. The bathroom was the most obvious change. Square footage doubled, showerhead upgraded, tile replaced. Irene squinted at the annotations in digital font, shared family amenity, guest accessible. Her name was nowhere on it. She moved quietly into the den, slid open the file drawer, and retrieved the red envelope Cliff Romero had mailed her last May, a copy for your records after the last fixture had been installed. She flipped it open, invoices, part numbers, handwritten notes. Every charge listed Irene Aldridge as the billing party. She remembered asking once, just once, why the tile had cost so much. Lana had smiled and said, "It's a gift. You'll be using it too, right? Don't think about it so much." But Irene had thought about it, for 11 months. She picked up the house phone again. 2 rings. Cliff Romero, the voice said, slow, a little tired. "Cliff," she said evenly. "It's Irene." A pause. "Mrs. Aldridge." "Hey there. You all right?" "I am, but my plumbing isn't." He chuckled gently. "I thought we were done with that bathroom last year." "Not quite," she said. "I need to ask you something. How hard is it to move a shower line?" Another pause. She could picture him rubbing his jaw, staring off into his workshop the way he always did before, quoting labor costs. "Well, depends where it's going." "Why?" "I want it separated," she said. "Physically, legally, everything. Can it be done?" Cliff's voice sharpened. "You want it gone?" "No," she said, slow and clear. "I want it mine." She could almost hear the grin forming behind his silence. "Then I'll get my boots." She hung up and gathered the blueprints again, careful, methodical, slipped them into a fresh folder and clipped them shut. Then she picked up her cell phone, the one she rarely used, and scrolled until she found the last message from Kelsey Brandt. "Still your lawyer, still watching. Call anytime." She pressed call. Kelsey answered on the first ring this time. "Talk to me." "The bathroom, the remodel. It wasn't filed properly, was it?" "Nope," Kelsey replied, already typing. "Permit was never finalized with the county. Technically, it's a non-conforming add-on if you want to get surgical with it." "I do." Kelsey's tone darkened slightly. Not unkind, just sharper. "What's your goal, Irene?" "To make sure they don't get 1 more inch of this house without bleeding for." A few keystrokes on the other end. "Then we start by correcting the parcel map. That bathroom? It's about to become its own address." Irene smiled, faint but full. The sun was beginning to rise outside the window, pale orange against the frost-dusted garden. She opened her desk drawer again and added a second entry beneath April 3rd. April 4th, secured Cliff. Confirmed Kelsey. Locate parcel map. She clicked the pen shut with finality. It started with the sound of dripping. Not loud, not even enough to be noticed by most. But Irene noticed. She always had. In the early hours of April 5th, while Lana and Josh were still sleeping off their wine and entitlement, Irene padded softly to the basement utility room. The light bulb flickered to life, revealing a tangled map of copper and PVC lines that ran the underbelly of her home like veins. Cliff had texted her the night before, "Main valve on the guest side is a separate feed. We can do it without touching the rest. Want to install the She replied with one word, "Yes." By noon, Cliff arrived with a canvas bag of tools and a pair of heavy gloves. No clipboard, no questions. They worked in silence, the kind that's not awkward but efficient. At Irene's request, Cliff installed a digital code lock inside the small access panel behind the guest bath wall, where the hot water line snaked its way into the luxury rain-head shower. Lana insisted on. He replaced it with a custom line routed from the garage's standing water tank, a rarely used backup system that Irene had kept filled with filtered, unheated water, just in case Boulder's pipes ever froze again. When the wrench turned, Irene didn't flinch, she simply watched. At 5:18 p.m., Lana went in for her usual post-Pilates soak. The music clicked on through the Bluetooth speaker. Saya, as always. The door closed. Then a shriek. Jesus Christ. It's ice. Irene was in the kitchen, stirring honey into her chamomile tea. She didn't even look up. There was the frantic slap of bare feet down the hallway, the wet slop of a towel poorly fastened. Lana appeared in the archway like a drowned rat. Her mascara was sliding off her lashes in twin tracks of war paint. Why the hell is there no hot water? Josh emerged from the living room, half confused, half panicked. Mom? Did something happen to the heater? Irene calmly folded the newspaper and placed it beside her mug. Not that I know of. The guest shower is like glacier cold, Lana snapped, shivering. Did someone mess with the lines? Irene took a long sip. Then, as if it had just occurred to her, maybe something got switched. Lana stared at her. You're kidding. Josh stepped in, hands raised like a referee. Okay, let's just not turn this into a thing. Mom, if there was some issue with the plumbing, you could have said something. Irene blinked slowly. I just assumed it was. She let the words settle in the air. A mix-up. Josh's face fell. Lana's eyes narrowed. But neither said anything. Later that evening, while Josh busied himself with dinner and Lana sulked in her robe, Irene opened her email and found the scanned survey Cliff had sent. The updated waterline diagram now reflected the changes. Hot water bypassed the guest bath entirely. A separate sealed line marked G-tank feed only ran to the redesignated suite. Just above the schematic, in Cliff's tidy penmanship, was a simple note. Your house, your heat. Irene clicked download. Then she opened her personal records folder, the one that now had 2 digital locks on it. She saved the file with a new title, Guest Bath Temperature Control. That night, she added one more note to the journal beside her bed. April 5, operation complete. No complaint filed, just a scream. The pen glided smoothly across the paper. Irene signed her name once, twice, then a third time with the practiced calm of a woman used to making things official. Kelsey flipped the final page of the parcel separation documents and nodded. Satisfied. It's fine. That wing is now its own legal entity. It belongs to you and you alone. Irene didn't smile. She just looked out the courthouse window. A snowmelt trickled off the eaves. Colorado's spring brittle and still pretending winter hadn't left. Back home, she waited until Lana had gone to her overpriced Bowery class, before unlocking the side entrance to the guest wing. The carpet was still faintly damp from yesterday's cold shower tantrum. The air had a cloying scent of lavender body spray and resentment. Cliff showed up 30 minutes later, toolbox in hand. You sure? He asked, eyeing the fixtures. The polished nickel faucet, the designer mirror, the ridiculous chandelier, Lana insisted, elevated the space. I want it reset, Irene said. Every bit. He went to work removing the modern amenities, piece by piece, like stripping borrowed armor. In their place he installed the brass fittings and porcelain knobs from Irene's original master bath fixtures that had served her through marriage, motherhood and mourning. When Amber came by after school, she stopped short at the hallway's end. Grandma, why does the guest wing have a keypad now? Irene looked up from the programming manual. Because it's not a guest wing anymore. Amber wandered in, peeking past the freshly painted trim. Her sneakers squeaked faintly on the newly buffed tile. You moved the whole bathroom? I reclaimed it, Irene said, piece by piece. Amber grinned. That's cold. Irene's mouth twitched. Temperature matches the intent. They both laughed softly, until Amber's smile faltered. Does Dad know? I'm sure he'll figure it out, Irene said, folding the manual closed. Eventually, that evening, as expected, Lana returned to find the keypad blinking red and the door locked tight. She rattled the handle, then stormed through the main hallway. Josh, she snapped. Why the hell is the bathroom locked? Josh looked up from his laptop. What bathroom? She threw her hands up. The guest bathroom. It won't open. Josh turned to Irene, now sitting quietly with her crossword. Mom? He asked, tentatively. Irene didn't look up. You mean the suite? That's mine. You can't just block access to part of the house. I didn't block anything, Irene said. I adjusted ownership. Lana scoffed. What does that even mean? Check the deed, Irene said, circling a 7-letter word for reclaim. I'm sure Kelsey can send you a copy. Josh's mouth opened, then closed again. Later that night, Irene opened her laptop and pulled up the Boulder County property records. The updated parcel map displayed clearly Aldridge main residence, Aldridge Annex private lot. Her name listed twice. Josh and Lana nowhere to be found. She scrolled down, clicking print. The laser printer whirred to life beside her. She placed the fresh copy on the fridge, the one Lana had once tried to reorganize with almond milk and collagen smoothie. Below the map, she taped a post-it in neat handwriting, "Do not enter, owner consent required." The zoning notice came in a plain white envelope, slipped into the mailbox like any other utility bill. Irene opened it calmly, in full view of Lana, who was watering the potted ferns she never remembered to trim. The letter was formal and vague, filled with the kind of bureaucratic phrasing meant to intimidate without accusation. Improper parcel designation, incomplete permitting, subject to inspection and review. Lana didn't even wait for her to finish reading. "Guess you're not as clever as you thought," she said, feigning sympathy. "The zoning board doesn't take kindly to sudden renovations, especially not from someone your age who forgets things." Irene folded the letter neatly and slid it back into the envelope. "Thank you for your concern." She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just went inside, placed the notice next to the landline, and dialed Kelsey's direct number. The next morning, Irene and Kelsey sat side by side in the conference room at City Planning. The air smelled faintly of toner and burnt coffee. Irene had brought her own binder, deep red leather, worn at the corners, and laid it gently on the desk like a sacred text. Kelsey started, "We're submitting a full counterclaim. All improvements to the annex were paid for directly by Ms. Aldridge. She has the receipts, the original blueprints, and a comprehensive record of correspondence with every contractor involved." The clerk raised an eyebrow. 15 years' worth. Irene opened the binder. Sheet protectors gleamed. Handwritten notes, dated photos, carbon copy invoices, everything preserved, everything legible. "This is every tile, every light fixture, every gallon of paint," Kelsey said. "Nothing filed under anyone else's name." And she slid a document forward. "Here's the notarized breakdown of the financial transfers. See the bank stamp?" The clerk skimmed the sheet, his brow furrowed deeper with each line. "This is unusually complete. We planned it that way," Irene said. By the time they left, the city had retracted the zoning notice. "It should never have been issued," the clerk admitted. "Frankly, this looks like a textbook example of proper documentation." Back home, Lana was waiting. "You're lying," she snapped the moment Irene walked in. "You don't even remember half the things you think you do. You probably made up half those receipts." "Lana," Josh warned, but she kept going. "I mean, she couldn't even find her phone last week. How do we know she didn't just scribble down dates and hope no one checked?" Irene said nothing. She reached into her tote bag, pulled out a crisp document in a transparent sleeve, and handed it to Josh. He read the top line aloud: "Neurocognitive Evaluation, Boulder Memory Center." There was silence. "It's dated 3 weeks ago," Irene said quietly. "Full assessment. MMSE score 30 out of 30. No cognitive decline, no impairment." Josh didn't meet her eyes. Lana scoffed again, but the sound had lost all volume. She turned and stormed upstairs. Josh lingered. Why didn't you tell me you were doing all this?" "Because you'd ask me to stop," Irene said. "And I'm done stopping." That night, Kelsey called with a final update. "Parcels locked. Challenge rejected. The annex is yours. Indisputably. But Irene, this may escalate. Be ready." "I am," Irene said. She was staring at the mailbox through the kitchen window, the last rays of sun catching on its bent aluminum edge. Just then she noticed movement near the porch, someone walking past the flower bed, slow and deliberate. A shape leaned toward the mailbox flap. Irene narrowed her eyes. She couldn't see the face clearly, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Lana. And her hand was in Irene's mail. Irene waited until 3:47 a.m. The house was still. Even the refrigerator, that ancient moaner, had gone silent between cycles. She pulled on her robe, tucked a small yellow notepad under her arm, and settled in at the dining table with her reading glasses and a second-hand Lenovo that Cliff had once fixed for her, just in case. The notepad held a handwritten list, precise, block-lettered, updated daily for the last month. Banking, email, utilities, retirement, insurance, credit. Each entry had 2 columns beside it, old password, blanked out in black marker, and new. She logged into her primary credit union account, the one Josh had once helped her set up joint access for to keep things simple. She clicked Manage Authorized Users. His name was the first listed, Joshua Aldridge. Birth year 1980. Access full. She hovered for a moment, then clicked Remove. A dialog box popped up. Are you sure you want to revoke joint access? Irene clicked yes without blinking. By morning, she'd reset every login and activated 2-factor authentication tied to her prepaid flip phone, the one no one else knew she still used. The passwords were now 12-character phrases only she would remember. Wrought iron 52, Pasadena tiles un 114, Chardonnay. Each one was a private memory. Each one locked a door. She visited the bank branch in person to remove Josh from the safety deposit box. The clerk hesitated. He's your son, right? He was my co-signer, Irene replied. He has no legal claim. Her voice was calm, surgical, like she'd practiced every word with Kelsey. By noon, the key was hers alone. The blowback came fast. Lana burst into the kitchen 2 days later, her phone held high like a courtroom exhibit. What happened to my app? Irene didn't look up from the crossword. Pardon? My phone's locked out of everything. Apple ID, email, even the calendar won't sync. You changed the settings, didn't you? Lana, Josh said gently from the hall. Why would Mom have access to your phone? Lana hissed. Because I set it up for her, remember? I used my email to make things easier. She was supposed to be too old to manage it. Irene turned the page. Seems that assumption has expired. The next day, Irene drove herself to the post office and requested a permanent forwarding order for all her mail to a newly opened P.O. box in North Boulder. It was quieter there, far from prying eyes and passive-aggressive glances over garden hedges. She filled out the form by hand. No online shortcuts. As she exited, she noticed the bundle of catalogs and parcels in her passenger seat. 3 of them bore her name, but not her doing. A luxury meal subscription box, a hair regrowth serum payment, something called Lux Foot Spa Elite. She drove home, checked her credit card statements, and confirmed what she already suspected. Dozens of auto renewals had quietly been siphoning money from her account for months. Lana's name wasn't on a single one. By nightfall, Irene had canceled them all. She spent 47 minutes on the phone with 6 different companies. She gave them no explanation, no complaint, only the words, no further charges, cancel, now. Each time she hung up, she wrote a check mark next to the service name. By 8:30 p.m., the entire notepad was crossed out. At 9:12 p.m., her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. She listened later, Josh's voice hushed, unsure. Hey Mom, did you change something with the Amex account? I tried to order something and it flagged me as unauthorized. Just let me know if you need help with it. She didn't call back. Instead, she opened her notes app and typed a new list. Access denied, phase 1 complete. She paused, then added, phase 2, observe spending attempts, record patterns, redirect mail, permanently, monitor surveillance install. She tapped save. Just then, a new notification popped up. Her credit monitor app, freshly installed, flagged a new inquiry attempt. Alert, attempted credit card application, Joshua Aldridge. Status blocked, frozen account. Irene stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she picked up her landline. Cliff answered on the second ring. You still know someone who installs front porch cameras? She asked. I do, he said. You ready for that step? I was ready when she reached into my mailbox. Irene sat in the armchair by the window, her posture straight, hands still in her lap. The therapist across from her clicked her pen once, then again. "So, Aldridge," she said, "we'll begin with the memory sequence. I'll list 5 words, you'll repeat them, and I'll ask for them again later." Irene nodded. "Go ahead." Garden, mirror, clock, violet, train. Garden, mirror, clock, violet, train. The rest of the evaluation moved briskly. Orientation, attention, language, problem solving. Irene ticked each answer off without hesitation. She didn't falter, didn't guess, didn't blink too long. When the therapist finally said, "Do you recall the 5 words?" Irene gave a slight smile. Garden, mirror, clock, violet, train. No hesitation. At the end, the evaluator stood to shake her hand. "We don't often see perfect scores at your age, Ms. Aldridge. Age doesn't dull steel." Irene replied. The report arrived in a sealed envelope, crisp and clinical. Irene scanned the line that mattered most. No signs of dementia, cognitive impairment, or executive dysfunction. She placed the report in her legal binder next to the deed and financial records. Then she opened her laptop and sent Kelsey a short email with the attachment and 1 line of text, in case they try again. 3 days later, Amber was in the guest room using Lana's computer, not snooping, just checking the school portal because her own Chromebook was dead. She clicked open a tab, then froze. "Grandma?" Irene looked up from the hallway. "Yes, sweetheart?" Amber turned the monitor slightly. The screen showed a search history still active in the browser's sidebar. "Can I get guardianship over elderly mother-in-law? How to prove mental decline? Does memory loss make someone unfit to handle finances?" Amber's mouth was tight. She was looking this up, about you. Irene stepped closer. Her expression didn't change. "I see," she said softly. "Close the browser, darling. And don't say anything to your dad yet." Amber's eyes were glassy. "I hate her." "No," Irene said gently, brushing Amber's hair back. "You just see clearly now." That night, Irene forwarded screenshots of the search history to Kelsey with another subject line, "Intent to control preliminary digital evidence." Within 10 minutes, Kelsey replied, "This fits. We'll build toward undue influence if it escalates. Keep logging everything." The next morning, Josh stood in the hallway with his phone. He looked confused, blinking at the screen. "Mom, did you change your emergency contacts?" Irene folded her laundry with sharp corners. "I did." He shifted. "I was listed for years." "You were," Irene said. "But that list is for people who act in someone's best interest. Not people who stay silent while their wife investigates ways to declare their mother legally incompetent." Josh's mouth opened, but no words came. "I'm not angry," she added calmly. "I'm just done pretending silence isn't participation." He stepped back like he'd been slapped, but Irene didn't raise her voice. That afternoon, Cliff came by in his battered Dodge toolbox, rattling in the bed. He installed the new security camera above the porch, one aimed squarely at the mailbox, the other at the side door that Lana liked to leave open for airflow. As he tightened the final bracket, Irene handed him a mason jar of iced tea. "She's going to try something else," she said. Cliff sipped and nodded. "She's panicking. People only claw when they're cornered." Irene watched the street, her eyes sharp. "Let her claw." That night, the camera light blinked to life for the first time. Irene watched from her laptop as it recorded 10 seconds of silence, then auto-saved to a hard drive in her drawer. At 11:02 p.m., while the house slept, Irene updated her journal. April 10, surveillance installed, guardian attempt uncovered, contact revoked. She set the pen down, but something in her gut tightened. She rose from her chair and crossed to the door. Just before locking up, she checked the front stoop. A package sat on the mat. No name, no return label, just a plain manila envelope. She bent slowly, picked it up and turned it over. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, "Anonymous. You need help. This isn't safe. Someone's going to report you." The sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway just after 8:00 a.m. Its engine was quiet, but the presence was loud. Irene stood on the porch, dressed in a navy cardigan and crisp slacks, her silver hair tied neatly. She didn't look rattled. She looked prepared. Deputy Waller stepped out, clipboard in hand. He was younger than she expected. 30, maybe. And polite in the way small-town law enforcement learned to be when dealing with older white residents in Boulder. "Ms. Aldridge?" he asked. "Yes. Got a report through the non-emergency line. Anonymous claim, but it alleges you may be mentally unfit to manage your affairs. We're required to follow up." Irene didn't sigh. She didn't bristle. She merely stepped back and held the door open. Inside, the dining table was laid out like a war table. 3 binders, 2 notarized letters, a memory evaluation still crisp from the envelope, and a laptop already queued to video footage showing Lana 5 days ago, rifling through Irene's unlocked mail. She gestured calmly. "You're welcome to review everything. I assume you'll want a copy for your report?" Waller blinked. "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." An hour later, the deputy left with a full folder in hand, and a quiet promise. "We'll be flagging the caller's number. If anything else happens, contact me directly." As soon as his car disappeared, Irene picked up the phone. "Kelsey, let's go on offense." But that afternoon, Kelsey filed a preemptive declaration with the State Elder Law Board, a rare move, but entirely legal. Protective affidavit of autonomy and intent. The filing included the neurocognitive report, the video footage, screenshots of Lana's browser history, a full record of spending manipulation, traced back to Irene's bank statements. The language was cold, factual, and searing. "This individual, Lana Aldridge, has demonstrated a pattern of covert financial influence, digital surveillance, and coercive inquiry regarding guardianship. Recommend formal warning and monitored distance. By 5, Lana received an official notice via email and hard copy. You are hereby instructed to refrain from interference in the legal, medical, and financial affairs of Irene Aldridge. Violation may result in civil penalties." In the meantime, Irene set up her tripod. The video will update was short, but deliberate. She sat in her study, framed by the window and her antique clock. Her voice was strong. "This is Irene C. Aldridge. I am of sound mind and body. I am voluntarily updating my last will and testament. I affirm all changes with full understanding and intention." She slid the signed documents into the camera frame. "I name my granddaughter, Amber Lee Aldridge, as sole successor trustee and beneficiary of my estate. Any attempt to contest this document will be met with immediate disinheritance per Clause 7. She clicked the camera off. The upload to Kelsey was instantaneous. Amber came by that evening. She looked nervous until Irene handed her a small manila envelope. Inside was a single sheet. Legal. Crisp. "You're listed now," Irene said. "As trustee executor. Everything." Amber looked up, blinking. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just don't let anyone bully you into giving them what they never earned." Amber swallowed hard. "I won't. I promise." At sunset, Cliff arrived in his battered truck. He carried a thick rectangular object under one arm. "What's that?" Irene asked, stepping out onto the porch. Cliff smiled. "Custom job. Laser-cut brass. Powder-coated. Took me 3 days." He held it up. "Aldridge Annex. Private residence. Owner. I.C. Aldridge." She ran her fingers over the letters. They were cold, sharp-edged, and permanent. Cliff drilled it into the post by the walkway directly beside the keypad lock. The brass caught the last light of the day and shimmered like a badge. They stood there quietly as the wind rolled through the maple trees. "You've done it," Cliff said. Irene didn't respond right away. Her eyes stayed locked on the horizon. That night, her phone buzzed. Not a call. A photo, sent from an unknown number. It showed the front of her house. Taken from the street. No message. No caption. Just a shot of her porch. From someone watching. It came certified. Just like Irene expected. The envelope was thicker than the others. Legal-grade cardstock. The kind meant to intimidate. Her name was typed in bold across the address block, but the return label bore the name of a Denver law firm she didn't recognize. Inside, a formal notice of intent to contest title and beneficiary status. At the bottom, on behalf of client, Mrs. Lana Aldridge. Irene didn't blink. She set the envelope beside her teacup, opened her laptop and typed one sentence to Kelsey. They filed. Time to bury it. The opposing attorney looked fresh out of law school, eager, well-dressed, and woefully unprepared for what Irene had brought. Kelsey opened her briefcase and began laying out evidence like she was dealing cards. Original deed, 1987. Survey map, notarized and updated 2000. Remodel invoices, signed by Irene Aldridge, paid in full via traceable transfers. Ownership trail, direct and unbroken. She dropped the memory evaluation on top, then the protective affidavit, then the surveillance footage screen-capped and time-stamped. Lana's attorney reached for the last sheet, squinting. Wait, this is from the city registrar? Kelsey nodded. Authenticated last week, stamped, certified, and publicly filed. Your client is attempting to challenge a legally partitioned property recorded under municipal authority. I'd advise you tread lightly. The young lawyer's eyes flicked toward the door. He cleared his throat. Given the strength of documentation, I think we'd be open to de-escalating this outside of litigation. Kelsey nodded once. Good. Then this meeting is over. Irene stood without a word. His palms were pressed flat on the counter, jaw tight with guilt. Mom, he said quietly, it doesn't have to go this far. Irene didn't even sit down. She set her purse on the table, removed her gloves one finger at a time. It already did, she said. The moment Vinegar touched my cornea. He looked at her, then really looked. The denial was slipping. The illusion of innocence cracking beneath the weight of everything he didn't stop. You think she meant it? He asked. The eye drops? Irene raised her eyes to meet his. Amber didn't think it was an accident. Amber had been sitting quietly at the breakfast nook. She hadn't said a word all evening. But now she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. That was never a mistake, was it? Irene's face softened. Just a little. No, she said. It wasn't. Amber nodded once and looked away. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Josh ran a hand down his face, the years catching up with him all at once. So what now? What happens next? Irene didn't answer. Not directly. She walked to the cabinet above the fridge, the one nobody touched since Harold died, and pulled out a small wooden box. She placed it on the table. Josh stared. You remember this? She asked. His brow furrowed. Dad's? She opened it. Inside, a stack of sealed envelopes, each labeled in Harold's script. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, an original title deed, a handwritten note, in case they ever forget who this house belongs to. Josh looked stricken. Irene only said the house was never shared. It was lent, now it's reclaimed. Then she unlocked her file safe and pulled out the thickest envelope, one marked simply, if they come for more. Envelopes stacked by month, post-it flags in red, yellow, and blue. A thick 3-ring binder sat open in the center, its spine labeled in bold incidents. Verified. Each page was time-stamped. Each entry, cross-referenced. April 12, 2022. Lana accidentally served food. Irene was allergic to twice. May 3, 2022. Josh redirected Irene's mail to their shared Amazon account. June through October, over $4,700 in unapproved charges from Irene's checking account, disguised as household items. Text messages were printed and clipped, screenshots from financial apps. A photo Amber had secretly taken of Lana slamming the pantry door in Irene's face. Even the bruise on her upper arm from last Christmas, the one Lana said came from a bump on the doorway, had been photographed in the mirror. Now all of it was laid out and color-coded. Names, dates, context. She slid it all into a clean manila folder and sealed it with a brass clip. No stickers, no tape, just weight and truth. Kelsey met her at the courthouse parking lot. Irene handed over the folder like it was a sacred relic. Chronological, labeled, cross-verified. One index per quarter. Kelsey opened it and skimmed a few pages. Her brow arched slightly. You built a case. I built a record. Irene replied. You'll build the case. Kelsey nodded. Do you want this filed now? No, Irene said. I already submitted a copy yesterday. Quietly, Kelsey's eyes flicked up. Adult Protective Services. Irene gave a single nod. This isn't for court, it's for consequence, she said softly. Did you file something? Irene didn't turn around. She was watering the orchids. Yes. Are you pressing charges? Irene set the watering can down. No. Amber looked relieved, then confused. I'm not filing charges, Irene clarified. I'm filing facts. Amber nodded, lips pressed tight. Her voice dropped lower. You're incredible. You know that? From the hallway, Cliff's voice echoed. She's more than that. He stepped in holding a small wooden box with brass corners. Inside was a folded leather pouch containing Irene's original will and trust packet, plus a few extras he'd picked up that day on her behalf. I knew there was steel in you, he said, smiling faintly. I didn't know it was tempered. Irene chuckled. Well, Cliff, some things only harden after fire. Top. By Friday, everything was filed and triple-backed. Irene had an encrypted flash drive mailed to Kelsey's office, a backup drive stashed in her safety deposit box. Then, for the first time in months, she packed a small duffel bag. She left early Saturday morning. No announcement, no explanation, just a handwritten note taped to the kitchen counter. Gone for the weekend. Do not call. She drove herself to a quiet guest lodge up in Nederland. Cliff had booked the room off-grid. No interruptions, the kind of place where the Pines outnumbered people and cell service gave up entirely. She arrived just before dusk. The front desk clerk handed her a key, a real one, metal and worn. The room had no TV, no distraction, just a fireplace and a thick wool blanket folded at the edge of the bed. Irene set her bag down, took off her shoes. She sat at the small wooden writing desk and opened the notebook marked contingency plan. One by one, she checked the box. Legal independence secured. Property title challenged and defended. Financial records protected. Will updated. Protective affidavit filed. APS informed. She drew a final box and labeled it retaliation strategy. If triggered, then her burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. No voicemail. No text. Just a second buzz. Then a third. She stared at the phone. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. The return address read, Department of Human Services, APS Division. She opened it. Inside, request for formal interview. The APS building sat at the edge of a modest office park just south of Pearl Street. Glass doors, beige walls, and the faint scent of printer toner clinging to the air. Irene had dressed sharply but without flair. Charcoal slacks, a pale blue blouse, and her late husband's wedding band strung around her neck on a gold chain. Kelsey was already there, briefcase resting neatly beside her chair. You ready? Irene smoothed a wrinkle from her sleeve. I've been ready since someone slipped vinegar in my medicine cabinet. A receptionist called her name. The interview room was plain but clean. No window, one wall-mounted clock. A pitcher of water that no one touched. The investigator entered, notepad in hand, wearing a quiet professionalism that Irene respected. She introduced herself as Dana Holloway, late 40s, with the practiced calm of someone used to parsing truth from tension. Ms. Aldridge, she said kindly, we appreciate you agreeing to meet in person. Irene gave a single nod. I wanted to look you in the eye. The interview began. Dana asked standard questions first. Daily routines, medical history, emergency contacts. Irene answered plainly, her voice steady, her facts exact. Then the deeper inquiries began. Have you ever been denied access to your own finances? Yes, Irene replied. Multiple times. I have logs. Has anyone discouraged you from speaking to friends or family? Yes. By whom? My daughter-in-law. Indirectly by my son. Kelsey slid forward the binder, open to the index page. We've categorized evidence by type: financial interference, psychological pressure, and physical neglect. Documentation spans the last 3 years. Dana raised her eyebrows. flipping through the first few tabs. She paused at a screenshot showing Lana's browser search, how to claim guardianship without consent. She tapped the page with her pen. This wasn't sent with the initial packet. It wasn't ready, Irene said. But now it is. Then came the question that made the room still. Why now? Dana asked. Why take formal action this late in the situation? Irene's voice was quiet but full. Because I kept hoping I was wrong. Silence hung like dust in the air. Dana folded her hands. Most people don't come this prepared. I didn't have a choice, Irene said. When someone tries to erase your rights, you document your existence. Dana sat back, eyes softening, but her professionalism held. We'll issue a full assessment within 10 business days. In the meantime, you are under no obligation to inform the involved parties of this meeting. Kelsey interjected. We'll handle all disclosures through counsel. Dana nodded. Understood. If we find coercion or elder abuse, APS will issue protective directive. You'll be contacted if any counterclaims are filed. Irene leaned forward slightly. What happens if they file one? Then we investigate them, Dana said. Thoroughly. The meeting ended without a handshake. Protocol, but the energy in the room had shifted. Irene stood slowly steady on her feet, while Kelsey gathered the documents. As they stepped into the parking lot, Kelsey exhaled. You were surgical in there. Irene gave a small smile. So were you. Kelsey unlocked the car. It's done. We wait. They drove in silence for a moment, the late morning sun slanting through the windshield. The foothills rose in the distance like quiet witnesses. Irene turned her face toward them. Her hand rested on the folder in her lap, the only one she had brought home. Inside was a single sheet. Contingency Phase 2. Inheritance. Activation only upon escalation. That evening, Irene walked the perimeter of the garden behind the annex. She checked the camera mounts, locked the gate, watered the rosemary without hurry. When she re-entered the kitchen, Amber was waiting, eyes wide. There's a police car down the street, she whispered. Parked. Watching. Irene didn't flinch. She poured a glass of water. Then she opened her laptop. A new message blinked in her inbox. Subject: Notice of Fiduciary Misconduct. Joshua Aldridge. The attorney's office was hushed, except for the gentle shuffle of paper. Irene sat at the long oak conference table, hands folded neatly in her lap, as Kelsey reviewed the updated estate packet one last time. This version replaces everything from the previous revision, Kelsey said. Clean, precise, bulletproof. Irene nodded once. At the top of the new document, the last will and testament of Irene C. Aldridge. It was short, deliberate, unsentimental. She scanned the clauses silently, then picked up the pen. One signature, one day, one clause circled twice in blue ink. Any individual who challenges this will in whole or in part shall be disinherited in full, regardless of relation. Below that, a name appeared. Just one. Beneficiary Amber Lee Aldridge. Amber didn't cry right away. When Irene handed her the envelope back home, a thinner copy, but legally identical, Amber stared at it as if it might burn through her fingers. I mean, why just me? Because you saw me, Irene said. When others refused, Amber sat down hard on the edge of the couch. Dad's going to freak. He already is, Irene replied. He just doesn't know the reason yet. Amber looked up, eyes wet. I never wanted anything. I never expected this. I know, Irene said gently. That's why you're the only one who deserves it. Outside, Cliff was replacing the old dented aluminum mailbox with a new one. A powder-coated black steel model with reinforced hinges and a digital lock. Same key code? He asked, tightening the final bolt. No, Irene's new one. Only you and I get it. Cliff gave a slow nod. Understood. He tapped the metal. This'll take a baseball bat to crack. And that's before they get to the camera watching it. Irene glanced up at the lens mounted beneath the eaves. Good. Inside, she sat at her desk and placed an order for 2 signs. One was already en route, small, brass-plated and professionally engraved. The other was simpler. White vinyl, bold black lettering. No access without owner consent. She uploaded a custom graphic, the outline of her annex, drawn by Cliff from the parcel documents. Below it, she typed protected by recorded title. She was sipping tea on the back porch when Josh called. She let it go to voicemail. Then the landline rang. She let that ring too. When the text finally arrived, "Can we talk, please?" She put her phone face down and walked inside. The next day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the county clerk. Irene slit the envelope with her thumbnail, unfolded the tri-folded page, and scanned the lines until she reached the one that mattered. Complaint reviewed and closed. No fiduciary breach on record by Irene Aldridge. Concern redirected to party in question, Joshua Aldridge. Further inquiry pending. She folded the letter, placed it in a folder labeled contingency, closed threads, and filed it in her desk. That evening, she and Amber shared a quiet dinner. Leftovers, cornbread, and strong coffee. Amber reached for her hand. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Irene said. "The wind's just changing." From the front lawn, Cliff's truck headlights cut across the driveway. He stepped out, holding the brass sign in both hands like a declaration. Amber opened the door, and Irene followed slowly behind her. Cliff mounted it into the freshly sealed post, just beside the new mailbox. It gleamed even under cloudlight. The lettering was smooth, sharp, final. Property of Irene C. Aldridge. Verified by legal survey. The next morning, Irene stood at the curb, watching the wind sway the pine limbs overhead. She noticed a familiar car parked 2 houses down, not moving. No license plate she recognized. Inside her inbox, a new email sat unread. Subject line, public notice, fraudulent testament allegation filed. The sender, Lana Aldridge. Email went live at 7:12 a.m. Lana's subject line was a shout, public notice, fraudulent testament allegation filed. The body read like a rant masquerading as a whistleblower memo. Claims of coercion, diminished mental capacity, elder confusion, and manipulation by outside parties. She seized the HOA board, 2 real estate forums, and for good measure a parenting Facebook group she hadn't posted in for 3 years. But Irene didn't flinch. She printed it, highlighted it, clipped it behind the latest entry in her incident log. Then she dialed Kelsey. "She made it public," Irene said. "We respond accordingly." Kelsey didn't miss a beat. "I'll file a libel claim this morning. You're on solid ground." By 10, the motion was already logged with Boulder County. Accompanying it was a 12-page dossier. Kelsey compiled overnight. Timestamps, screenshots, medical clearances, sworn statements, and Lana's own browser search history from Amber's earlier capture. How to file for guardianship against elderly relative without consent. How to reverse will update from narcissistic grandparent. What happens if your mother-in-law disinherits you? That afternoon, Irene composed her own letter, not to the court, but to the people Lana tried to sway. Subject, to whom it concerns, and I know it concerns many. Body, you may have seen the rumors, you may have heard the whispers, so let me give you facts. The annex was paid for with my money. The parcel was signed under my name. My cognitive evaluation is public record. I passed with a perfect score. The new will is notarized, recorded, and protected by law. The accusations made against me are false, reckless, and hurtful. Attached you'll find the documentation to prove it. I trust you'll draw your own conclusions. I already have. Irene C. Aldridge. She sent it directly to the HOA, CCing the board, her neighbors, and 2 longtime family friends, who still ran the community bulletin. The replies came quickly. "Irene, we're so sorry this is happening. My parents went through something similar. We're behind you. Let us know if you ever need a witness statement. She should be ashamed of herself. Stay strong." One by one, the community closed ranks around her. That Friday, the call came in from Dana Holloway at APS. "We've reviewed everything," Dana said. "Multiple times. No misconduct found. No intervention needed." Irene was silent on the other end for a beat. Then she exhaled. Thank you. We are, however, Dana added, flagging Lana Aldridge's name. She may face a formal warning if she continues to misrepresent facts in public record. Kelsey had already prepared the next step. We'll be requesting a restraining clause through civil court. No contact, no proximity. Approved in advance, Dana said. And if she files again, it's on record now. By Sunday, Lana's boutique fitness studio, Core Bloom, saw 5 client cancellations. 2 of them sent emails citing ethical concerns. One forwarded Irene a copy of her message with a note at the bottom. We believe you. She lost our trust. Josh didn't say anything. Not to Irene, not to Amber, not to the board. But 2 days later, a letter arrived addressed to Mr. Joshua Aldridge. IRS Office of Investigations. Intent to lane notification. Suspected tax discrepancy 2021-2023. Third-party income filing under the name Irene C. Aldridge. He stood in the driveway holding the notice like it might bite him. Amber saw it from the window. She didn't go out. That night, Irene updated the final line in her second ledger. Contingency, public fallout, activated. Result, secured. She closed the cover, walked out to the annex porch, and stared up at the brass sign. Her fingers brushed the edges of the engraved letters. Still cold, still hers. Then the camera blinked. A figure at the end of the driveway. Slim, shoulders tense. Lana. She stood for a moment, phone in hand, as if debating something. Then flash. A photo of the sign. She turned and walked away. Dutched. Petition to disqualify Last Testament on grounds of undue emotional influence by minor Amber Lee Aldridge. In their place, shelves lined with hardcovers, a roll-top desk Cliff had found at a salvage auction, and a leather armchair angled perfectly to catch the late afternoon sun. At the center of the wall, framed and floodlit, was Irene's original deed to the property. Brass-plated, embossed, the signature, unmistakable. She stood in the doorway a long time before stepping in. This wasn't a guest wing anymore. It was hers. Her study, her map room, her refuge. And today it would be her gathering place. Outside, the garden bloomed in quiet rebellion. Rosemary, peonies, and native columbine filling the beds Cliff helped raise. He was already arranging folding chairs under the maple tree when Amber arrived carrying a mismatched basket of lemon bars and black tea. I tried to bake, Amber said, setting it down, but I forgot to check if the baking powder expired. Irene smiled. Even bad lemon bars are better than good silence. They laid out the settings on Irene's old tablecloth, faded blue gingham, softened by years in the linen drawer. Cliff poured tea. Amber placed small glass bowls of berries and sugar cubes. Irene passed around cloth napkins like it was the most natural thing in the world, because now it was. They didn't speak of Lana, or Josh, or legal filings. Not directly. But when Amber caught Irene staring up at the annex sign, property of Irene C. Aldridge, verified, she reached over and gently touched her wrist. You feel like yourself again? Irene looked around the yard, her yard, and nodded. More than that, she said, I feel uninterrupted. Later that afternoon, she wrapped a small wicker basket in cellophane and tied it with navy satin ribbon. Inside, a jar of honey from the farmer's market, a leather planner with brass corners, and a gift card to the best French bakery in Boulder. On top, a handwritten card. Kelsey, you didn't just fight, you translated silence into evidence. You turned the page with me. Irene, she handed it to Cliff. Drop it off at her office, would you? Gladly, he said, tucking it into the trunk. Before he left, he helped her mount one last sign. Not beside the mailbox. Not near the porch. In the center of the herb garden, staked deep into the soil, a rectangular brass plaque. Property of Irene Aldridge, verified. This plot, like its owner, will not be moved again. That week, Amber began volunteering at the senior legal advocacy clinic down in Denver. She didn't tell Irene right away, but on Saturday she left a post-it on the fridge. Clinic went well, taught a woman how to request her own bank records. She thought she wasn't allowed. She cried when I said she was. Love you. Irene stared at the note for a long moment. Then she pinned it inside her ledger, between two pages marked Phase 2 complete, Phase 3 legacy, not revenge. She hadn't used it since Harold got sick. But the woman at the circulation desk remembered her. You always requested those architectural biographies, she said, smiling. Frank Lloyd Wright, wasn't it? I'm trying fiction now, Irene replied. New genre, new lens. She left with 3 novels, 1 essay collection, and a copy of The Art of Quiet Fortitude she hadn't seen since the 90s. She walked back to the annex with her tote, heavier, her step lighter. Inside, the sun lit her desk through the half-drawn curtain. She sat down, opened her ledger, and began writing something new. Restoration initiated. That evening, a courier dropped off a large envelope at the front door. Irene opened it cautiously. Inside, an official court summons, not directed at her, but at Lana Aldridge, filed by the state. Charge, false representation and elder manipulation with intent to defraud. She read the first line, then the last. Then she walked it calmly to her desk and clipped it behind a fresh divider. Final phase initiated. Irene walked the property alone just after dawn. No shoes, no coffee, just the hum of crickets still shaking off night and the soft thud of her heel against soft tilled soil. She moved slowly, palm dragging along the cedar fence Cliff had reinforced last spring, knot to groove, post to hinge. Every splinter was familiar. Every step stitched her tighter to the ground. The rosemary still smelled sharp. The stones under the maple held the sun's heat from yesterday. And when she reached the side path where the annex turned sharply back into the old foundation line, she paused. This used to be their guest wing. Then it became something else. A storage closet for accusations, a dressing room for performance, a quiet corridor of control. Now, it was still, and hers. She stood for a long time in the frame of the annex's bathroom window. Lana used to film skincare tutorials here, voice dipped an octave to sound relatable. Now the counter was empty. No serums, no staged towels rolled into spa shapes. Just a ceramic dish with a single bar of soap and a brushed steel faucet. Cliff had installed with his own 2 hands. The tiles echoed with her breath. And silence. Abby Hamber found her sitting on the edge of the porch, notebook resting on her knees, pen tapping gently. You ever think about moving? Amber asked, tentative. Irene didn't lift her eyes. No. Amber sat beside her. Why not? Irene finally looked out across the garden, toward the horizon where pine met blue. The early light caught on the brass garden plaque like it always did, bright, unwavering, because I already reclaimed the address. Kelsey arrived just before noon, with the last envelope. She wore jeans and a loose sweater, her briefcase replaced by a canvas folder and a tired but triumphant smile. This is it, she said, handing it over. The final title adjustment. Everything recorded. Everything closed. Irene held it with both hands. No more filings, none needed. The will stands, the complaint stands, the county knows where the deed belongs, and now so does the state. She glanced toward the annex. You want me to drop it off? I can file it today. Irene shook her head. No, I'll do it. A clerk's office hadn't changed in 30 years. Same plastic plants, same low hum of aging fluorescence. The same receptionist who once mistook her for Harold's assistant. But this time Irene didn't stand behind anyone. She stepped forward, set the manila envelope on the counter. This is for property title update, she said. Final certification, under my name alone. The woman glanced at the form, then at Irene. Annex lot? Yes. With parcel override per the September amendment. Kelsey Vaught filed the initial form. I'm here to finalize. The woman blinked. Right. Yes. It's rare to see this kind of closure. Irene didn't smile. She didn't need to. Closure isn't rare, she said. People just don't expect women my age to finish what they start. Back home, the porch was warm, the light shifting. A breeze rolled up from the base of the hill, lifting the edge of the new annex sign. Cliff had returned earlier to tighten the bolts, and Amber had left a daisy tucked in the corner of the mailbox. Bright, awkward, honest. Irene stepped back onto the path. She walked it again. Front fence, side door, garden bed, herb patch, the old swing frame. Harold once painted in a rush before guests arrived. The annex key in her pocket, cool and curved. This place wasn't haunted anymore. It was marked. Every inch of it bore her presence, not her absence. Every corner she once yielded, she now stood in, and every signature she was told to defer, she'd replaced with her own. Inside, she filed the final form in her ledger. No divider this time, just one line across the top. Phase 3 concluded. At the bottom she wrote the final words. She gave me Vinegar. I gave her the deed, just not